Section 4, Ecosystem Recycling or Cycles in Nature. You will find this section in page 371 in your textbook. After finishing this section, you should list 4 major biochemical cycles, summarize 3 important processes in the water cycle, outline the major steps in the carbon cycle, describe the role of decomposers in the nitrogen cycle, and summarize the major steps of phosphorus cycle. At the beginning of the lesson, you will find a word called biochemical cycles. What is the meaning of biochemical cycles? Biochemical cycles means when any substance such as water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, oxygen passes between the living and non-living surrounding environment. This is called biochemical cycle. So biochemical cycle, whenever any substance transfer between living and non-living things. Let's start with water cycle. Water cycle is the process by which the water is transferred between the atmospheric water and the land water. In the water cycle, you will see 3 main processes or key processes, which are evaporation, transpiration, and precipitation. Let's take a deep look into the water cycle. Water cycle mainly between the water in the land and the water in the air. The water on the land, you will find it as lakes, rivers, ocean, something called groundwater, and the groundwater is the water in the soil or underground. Okay? All those are called water bodies. So the water cycle starts when the water bodies, which are the water on the earth, start to evaporate. Evaporate means it transforms from the form of liquid water into water vapor. So again, evaporation, when the liquid water from the water bodies transform to water vapor as clouds. So, is there another process like the evaporation? Yes, it's called transpiration. And the transpiration is the same meaning of evaporation, but this is for plants. Whenever the plants lose water from its leaves, it's called transpiration. So, simply, the transpiration is the process by which water evaporate from the leaves of the plants to a water vapor. So, again, starting from the water bodies, wherever it's groundwater, ocean, lakes, rivers, evaporates into water vapor, and the transpiration also, which is evaporation of the water in the plants to a water vapor. All of those form clouds, okay? When the clouds became crowded and the clouds contain lots of water vapor, okay? It transfers again to the earth by something called precipitation. So, precipitation is the process at which the water vapor in the atmosphere transfer again to a liquid water on the earth. It could be in form of rain, snow, sleet, hail, or fog. So, this is the whole process. In the diagram, you will find something called percolation, which is how the water from the lakes and from the ocean or the river goes to the soil. This is a process called percolation. Okay, let's see the visual concept of the water cycle.
Evaporation occurs when liquid water from the Earth's surface and from living organisms changes into water vapor. Condensation occurs when water vapor cools and changes into liquid water droplets that form clouds in the atmosphere. Precipitation is rain, snow, sleet, or hail that falls from clouds onto the Earth's surface. Runoff is water that flows across land and collects in rivers, streams, and eventually returns to the ocean. Infiltration is the movement of water into the ground due to the pull of gravity. Percolation is the downward movement of water through pores and other spaces in soil due to gravity. The water cycle is the continuous movement of water from the atmosphere to Earth and back.
After this, we have carbon cycle. Carbon cycle is the cycle of the passing of carbon from living organisms to the atmosphere and vice versa. Let's see how the carbon cycle starts. Mainly, there are two steps for the carbon cycles, whether taking the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere or releasing it. The only process that takes the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is a process called photosynthesis. And photosynthesis, as you know, is how the plants are making their own food. So the plants are taking the carbon dioxide from the air or from the atmosphere, transfer it inside their bodies into carbohydrates and releasing oxygen. So now the carbon dioxide inside the plants as carbohydrates. Okay, then all the consumers or other consumers like animals, human, birds, any consumer eat the plants and taking the carbohydrates inside the plants into their bodies. Then those animals, when they die, okay, they decompose. So the decomposers break down the dead bodies into their main nutrients, which release again the carbohydrates or the carbon dioxide which was in their bodies again into the atmosphere. Another process occurs by the decomposers. Sometimes if those bodies buried into a proper conditions and kept for many years, like 1,000 years or sometimes more than that, they transfer into fossil fuel. Fossil fuel like the fuel we are using in most of our machines, like cars, ships, anything using fuel. Whenever we are burning fossil fuel, we are doing something called combustion. So combustion is the burning of fossil fuel. Burning of fossil fuel or combustion returning back again or increasing again the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Also another process called cellular respiration, which is the taking of oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide into the air, which is something like the breathing, okay? So cellular respiration, again, the same process as taking oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So to sum the carbon dioxide, the only process that takes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is the photosynthesis. All the other processes just release carbon dioxide. And that's why we should take care, because we have a very important role in the carbon cycle, which is we have to decrease the amount of carbon cycle in the air by increasing the number of plants and decreasing our activities like burning things like combustion, because whatever you are increasing the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you are increasing the temperature and you are increasing the global warming. Okay, let's see now the visual concept for the carbon cycle.
All living things are made of molecules that contain carbon. The movement of carbon from the non-living environment into living things and back is called the carbon cycle. Carbon moves from the atmosphere into living things through photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, plants, algae, and some bacteria use carbon dioxide to make sugar. Many animals get the carbon they need by eating plants. Some of the carbon returns to the atmosphere through respiration. During respiration, organisms break down sugar molecules to release energy. Carbon dioxide and water are released as byproducts. Eventually, organisms die. When organisms decompose, some of the carbon is returned to the atmosphere. Under certain conditions, decaying organisms form fossil fuels. Humans burn fossil fuels to produce power. During combustion, fossil fuels are converted to carbon dioxide and water. The carbon dioxide is returned to the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere can then pass through the cycle again.